I've got a fairly bleak view of the future for what I call the generalist salesperson. If you're just a generalist, in other words, a walking brochure, and the buyer's already got the information at hand, at their fingertips, what value are you adding to the buyer?
Sure.
And therefore, why would the buyer spend their time talking to you?
Is it really up to the organisation to be successful as a sales unit rather than down to the individual being able to impact on that sales result? And I guess that's my question is where everything you've spoken about there to me sounds like it can be impacted by the organisation, not the salesperson that works for the organisation.
Yes.
So where does the salesperson come in to the future when it comes to sales effectiveness and what can salespeople be doing? Or do we throw methodology out the window and just focus on the customer and helping educate them when we're selling to them?
Look, that's a key point, and I write about that in the book.
Yeah.
The poor old salesperson is doing what they're told in many cases.
Yeah.
You know, they've got KPIs and measurements that they're adhering to, depending on the business.
Yeah.
And more often than not, it's still, unfortunately, in that old push style where, volume metrics, how many calls have you made, how many meetings you've got, is your pipeline 3 to 5 times quota, all of those old-fashioned kind of measurements.
Yeah.
So, to your question, if the organisation from the top down doesn't recognise that we need to change the way we go to market, then the salesperson will be forced, whether they like it or not, to keep behaving the same way they always have.
Yeah.
And so I've got a fairly bleak view of the future for what I call the generalist salesperson. If you're just a generalist, in other words, a walking brochure, and the buyer's already got the information at hand, at their fingertips, what value are you adding to the buyer?
Sure.
And therefore, why would the buyer spend their time talking to you? And clearly now they don't. So the key point here is that for salespeople, they've got to specialise.
Okay.
And when they specialise in whatever area, they become valuable. They can bring commercial insights. They can open with a narrative that captures the buyer's attention. And if they can carry that narrative through, then they're adding real value.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I find when people are telling stories about what's going on with other clients is perhaps the most powerful narrative because you can't get that from a brochure.
No.
Other people in your industry are doing X to get a competitive advantage.
Yep.
That customer's going to want to talk to you. What are my competitors doing without giving away anything confidential? What are my competitors doing?
Yep.
At the very least, I want to work that out. Even if I've got no interest in buying your product, I should be interested in that, shouldn't I?
100%.
As a buyer.
100%. You're right. Storytelling is, everyone's talking about the importance of storytelling.
Yeah.
The really great salespeople in this day and age and moving forward will be specialised, and they'll be capable of very quickly and succinctly rolling out a story that's relevant and personalised to their target customer.
So I guess, so much of us, and we did this with Tony Hughes when he was the keynote a couple of months ago at the Sales Masterminds.
Yep.
We all turned around to each other and Tony asked us to give a 1-minute narrative on what we do. And each of us at the table went on to talk about us and me and our product. And that's the brochure selling, isn't it?
It is.
And so much of us, I noticed at that event, are still in that mode where it really needs to be about them, what's going on in their space.
Yep.
And that's where being a specialist becomes handy, right? Because you're able to perhaps not just be a specialist in a product area, but in a market segment, so you can speak to what's going on in that market and lead with education.
Yes.
And perhaps challenging in some environments. You're doing it this way. Well, here's what best practice looks like.
Yeah.
How's that going for you? Because your competitors are experiencing this.
Yep.
Let me show you how they're doing it.
Yes.
100%. That's going to get the attention, but that's where the salesperson remains relevant.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%. Look, what you're talking about there with the 1-minute exercise is, they're bad habits and they're hard to break.
Yeah.
But the really smart guys and savvy vendors these days are doing exactly what you said. They're tipping the whole thing on its head.
Yep.
They're coming at it from the buyer perspective. They're educating. They're helping. I was told in my very first week of sales, I think I started in 1989, my first job, I was told always be closing. The ABC of selling, always be closing. And that denotes pushing your buyer through, pushing them to buy something when they're not quite ready. Now it's all about always be helping. So we've gone from ABC to ABH.